Alright guys, in this video we are going to learn all about JSX. JSX is probably the word you are going to see and hear a lot in the world of React. So it's really important that you understand what is JSX and why is it used. Alright, let's begin. JavaScript XML or JSX is an extension to the JavaScript language syntax. With the React library, it's an extension to write XML-like code for elements and components. And just like XML, JSX tags have a tag name, attributes, and children. Now why do we need JSX? Well, the truth is, JSX is not a necessity to write React applications. You can definitely use React without JSX, but JSX makes your React code simpler and elegant. As you might have already seen, it provides a syntax which is familiar to many developers. JSX ultimately transpiles to pure JavaScript, which is understood by the browsers. So we talked about what is JSX and why do we use it. But how does it work behind the scenes? What does the code look like without JSX? Let's take a look at that. What I will do is create a React component using JSX and without using JSX. That way you not only understand how JSX translates to regular JavaScript, but also appreciate how it brings out simplicity in your code. Now I'm going to start by creating a new file called hello.js within the components folder. This is going to be a simple functional component that renders hello visuals in the browser. So first step, as always, import React. Second step, create the function that returns what appears to be HTML, but is in fact JSX. Const hello is equal to an arrow function, so empty parentheses, and within the curly braces, we are going to return HTML, which is in fact JSX. Hello visuals. So a div tag within the div tag, and h1 tag, and the text hello visuals. Finally, make sure to export it as the default export. Now in app.js, I can import the component and include the tag in the render method. So import hello from components hello. I'm going to comment out greet and welcome, and instead include the hello tag. If you save the files and take a look at the browser, you should be able to see hello visuals. So this is the JSX version of hello component. Now let's rewrite the component without using JSX. To help us do that, the React library provides a create element method. So within the function, the code now changes to return React create element. And this method at minimum accepts 3 parameters. The first parameter is a string, which specifies the HTML tag to be rendered. For our example, we need a div tag to be rendered. So React create element with the first parameter a string called div. The second parameter, we get to pass any optional properties. For the example we have right now, we don't need any additional properties, so we can simply pass in a value of null. The third parameter is the children for the HTML element. That is, children for the div tag. Again, for our example, we simply have the text hello visuals, which we will pass as the third parameter. If we now take a look at the browser, you should be able to see the text hello visuals, but this is slightly different from what we had before. The h1 tag is missing, so let's include that. h1 and a closing h1. If you now take a look at the browser, the output is not what we were looking for. If we inspect the element, you can notice that it is just inner text to the div tag, and the h1 tag is not a DOM node. Let's fix this. If we go back to VS Code, it turns out that the createElement method can accept any number of elements as children. So let's split the h1 tag and the text into 2 elements. So the third parameter is going to be now the h1 tag, and the fourth parameter is going to be the text hello visuals. If you now take a look at the browser, the output is slightly different, but it is still not what we are expecting it to be. If I inspect the element now, we still have the div element, but it contains 2 text nodes. h1 is a text node, and hello visuals is a text node. To render h1 as an h1 element and not as a text node, what we have to do is call the createElement method for the second time. So, if I go back to VS Code, the third parameter now is going to be again React.createElement. The first parameter is the tag, so h1. We have no additional properties, so null. And finally, the text hello visuals. If we save this and take a look at the browser, the output is finally what we were looking for. Hello visuals in an h1 tag. Now let's go back and take a look at the second parameter we have been ignoring. The second parameter basically is an object of key-value pairs that will be applied to the element. For example, let's say we need an ID attribute on this div tag. We can specify an object key is ID and the value is hello. If you now take a look at the browser and inspect the element, you can see the ID attribute with the value of hello. Similarly, let's say we need to add a class to the div tag. So within the object class of value, dummy class. If you take a look at the browser and inspect the element, you can see the class attribute being applied. But if you take a look at the console, you're going to find a warning. Invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? In JavaScript, class is a reserved word. We did see the class keyword being used to create React components in the last video. So in React, a CSS class has to be specified using the class name attribute. So instead of class, it has to be class name camel-cased. Take a look at the browser. There is no warning in the console. And if you inspect the element, you can see that we still have the class attribute being applied as dummy class. Now the same in JSX is going to be div class name is equal to dummy class. So there you go, a React component with and without using JSX. And by now it must be clearly evident which is the more simpler approach. Basically, each JSX element is just syntactic sugar for calling React.createElement. And that is why you have to import the React library when you use JSX. If you take a look at greet.js, you probably wonder, why is React being imported? I don't even notice it being used anywhere. But the fact is, JSX translates into React.createElement, which in turn uses the React library. Our example just has 2 elements. But imagine a component with 10 or 100 elements. It starts to become really clumsy. JSX, on the other hand, will keep the code elegant, simple, and readable. Let me also talk to you about some of the differences you are going to see in JSX compared to regular HTML. The first one, which we have already seen, is class being replaced by class name. Similarly, we also have for being replaced by HTML4. Again, for is a keyword in JavaScript. You are also going to see camel case property naming convention instead of HTML attribute names. For example, onClick and tab index will become onClick and tab index. That is camel casing. Alright, that is pretty much what I wanted to discuss about JSX. Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. I'll see you guys in the next video.